Today I want to talk about the Furietti Centaurs. I saw these magnificent black marble sculptures while I was in Rome and visiting the Capitoline Museum. The Capitoline Museum was designed by Michelangelo and is probably one of the oldest museums in existence, having been open to the public since the 1700s. I'm going to be using images that I found on the internet, and in particular, some photographs by this photographer named Carol Radato. She is French, and she maintains this, I believe you would call it a blog, called Following Hadrian. It's a great blog. It's got amazing photos and great information there, so I highly recommend that you check it out. Okay, so one of the first things that struck me when I saw these, and this was about 10 years ago, was the use of colored marble. Now, a lot of times these days, art historians like to emphasize the fact that sculptures were frequently painted in classical antiquity. And I think they tend to overemphasize this just because it sort of rubs us the wrong way as modern viewers who kind of prefer and enjoy the look of sculptures unvarnished with just the natural marble and sort of balk at the idea of these gaudily painted sculptures. But sculptures like these seem to have been made with the intention of showing off this very beautiful, very expensive and unusual colored marble. And I think we even have some frescoes that depict white marble statues, which seems to indicate that statues were not always painted in classical antiquity, despite what some art historians claim. And while I think they were probably much more often painted in the archaic times, you can argue that as the archaic sort of waned into the classical and then the sort of the Hellenistic and later phases of classical art, probably these different tendencies coexisted. Here is the so-called red fawn, which is also made of a beautiful colored marble. And like the Furietti sculptures, the Furietti Centaurs, it also comes from Hadrian's villa. Let me read you a bit from Radato's blog. The sculptures were discovered in December 1736 during excavations in the Accademia carried out by Cardinal Giuseppe Alessandro Furietti, an antiquarian and philologist. Only a few days after obtaining rights to excavate a section of Hadrian's villa, Furietti's team unearthed the famous statues of centaurs known today as the Furietti Centaurs. The two masterpieces quickly became the most celebrated sculptures in Rome, partly through two engravings made in 1738 and 1739 under Furietti's supervision. And now I'm going to skip down to a little further on in the blog where it discusses Hadrian and who he commissioned these sculptures from. Keep in mind that Hadrian was the emperor of Rome from 117 to 138 AD. But when it refers to Hellenistic art and the fact that these may have been copies of Hellenistic originals, the Hellenistic age is usually given as 323 BC all the way up to 31 BC, so anywhere in that time frame. Okay, from Radato's blog. The Capitoline sculptures, probably commissioned by Hadrian himself, are copies of Hellenistic bronze sculptures. They were created by Aristeas and Papias of Aphrodisias, who may have also carved the so-called fauno rosso, red fawn. The sculpture's signatures have survived and can be seen on the plinths of both sculptures. The statues are carved in Biggio Morato marble from the quarries of Göktepe, located approximately 40 kilometers from the ancient city of Aphrodisias in Caria, modern-day Turkey. A famous excuse me, a city famous for its sculptural school, which rose to prominence under Hadrian. The Göktepe quarries, discovered in 2006, produced high-quality, fine-grained white, black, gray, and bichrome marble. These different varieties of marble were used mainly by Aphrodisian artists and became well established in Italy at the beginning of the 2nd century AD. The Göktepe marbles were among the most prized and widespread statuary marbles, which formed part of the decorative program of Hadrian's villa. Now, just for fun, I thought I'd show you that she actually has an article on this city of Aphrodisias in Turkey, or what would be modern-day Turkey, back then Anatolia or Asia Minor. And you can see where it is on the map here. And there are some really nice photographs that I assume she took of the ruins of Aphrodisias. So it's just kind of cool to get a feel for the relationship that Emperor Hadrian had with Greece. I mean, he was, I think everybody knows he was kind of a Greco-phile. He was a lover of all things Greek culture. He really promoted sort of links with Greece, cultural links with Greece, and was a great patron of the arts. And so you can kind of get a sense for his love for this kind of the deep roots of this culture in Asia Minor and Greece proper. It looks like a beautiful place. I'd love to visit it one day. Okay, going back to the centaurs themselves, let's spend some time contemplating these amazing artworks. First off, if you know anything about ancient Greek art, you will recognize the Hellenistic style that these are executed in. And this involves a lot of contortion, the twisting, kind of tortured poses. And Hellenistic art was sort of looked down on for a while the more, what was perceived as the more refined classical style was sort of idealized. This attitude was really prevalent during the neoclassical age. But these days, I think that very few people adhere to that kind of opinion, and most people recognize that Hellenistic art was spectacular and, in some sense, almost the pinnacle of the Greco-Roman tradition. There's an amazing sense of naturalism. Just look at these rippling muscles all throughout the centaur's body. It seems like these artists really studied the anatomy, at least the surface anatomy of these creatures. Well, and by creatures, I mean humans and horses, not necessarily centaurs. I don't believe they had any specimens of real live centaurs to study, but you get what I'm saying. Now, this one is called Old Centaur, and this one is called Young Centaur. And this has a lot to do with the suggested meaning of these two artworks. They do seem to have been intended as a pair, so they kind of, the meaning feeds off the juxtaposition of each other. And it's also hard to understand this meaning unless you know a little something, a little secret here, which is that there used to be an Eros seated on the back of each one. This can be clearly seen in the version of this sculpture that exists in the Louvre. This is also a Roman sculpture from the same rough time period as those others. And it was discovered somewhere in a different location, if I'm not mistaken, in Rome. And this one still has the Eros or Erote on its back. There's a lot of different words for these little winged creatures. We call them cupids today. We tend to call them cupids in the plural. Of course, Cupid was a singular one god, Eros, and the profusion of these little deities is kind of confusing if you were expecting it just to be one one god, Eros. So, the fact that by this point in history, it seems like they had already sort of multiplied into erotes instead of the singular eros. And so a little more like what we think of as cupids. Now, I'm going to try to conjure up a memory from 10 years ago of what I read on the sign beside this old centaur. Essentially, it said something to the effect that this old centaur is being tortured and tormented by the Eros who is pulling on his hair as his arms are bound behind his back. And it signifies the fact that age does not abate the lust we feel for beauty and youth, and yet it ties us, it prevents us from reaching out to grasp it. And thus the torment that we see on the face of the old centaur. Now, the younger centaur has a joyful expression, and we can imagine that the Eros that would have been on his back would have existed in a more, let's say, congenial attitude towards him. And of course, sadly, there is not another copy of this one that survived that could show us what that would have been. But we can imagine, again, this stark contrast between the old centaur who is tormented by love and the younger centaur who has a easy relationship with it. And it's really fun just looking back at the physical aspects of these sculptures. It's really fun to notice all the interesting detail in these sort of tufts of hair on the chest and belly, and the extra attention that was put towards sort of making these shaggy, bestial creatures. Look at these little incised lines that show the hair along the hoof and ankle of the leg there. I read somewhere that this curved stick that the young centaur has is supposedly something that was used for hunting hares. We can also see that he has the skin of a boar draped over his arm, showing that he's a youthful, vigorous hunter. He's engaging in all the kinds of activities that youths enjoyed in those days. And notice the panpipe there beneath him. It also seems to indicate a kind of joy or levity. And I just want to finish off by reading you one line from Wikipedia that I found very interesting. The strongly contrasted moods were intended to remind the Roman viewer of the soul troubled in pain and love, or uplifted in joy, themes of Plato's Phaedrus and Hellenistic poetry. Now, this inspired me to go and dig into Plato's Phaedrus a little bit, and I highly recommend you to also check it out. And if you're ever in Rome, don't forget to stop by the Capitoline Museums and see these gorgeous artworks in person. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I really appreciate it if you do. My channel is not monetized, but I do have a book you can buy, and it's called Thoughts. If you want to find it, just look up Brian D.K. Thoughts on Amazon, but make sure you have books selected when you search Brian D.K. Thoughts, otherwise it won't show up. It has around 150 illustrations. It took me about 10 years to make it, and it really is just a collection of random thoughts, thoughts on many different subjects, ranging from mortality, romance, quasi-philosophical issues. It's full of my art, so if you're interested in seeing my own drawings, then there's many, many examples in this book. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and ciao for now.